The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome to another episode of Speaking with the Senator. I'm Senator Kevin Avard, and today we're going to be talking with a millennial. And we're interested in how the millennials are getting along, what they're thinking about, their career patterns, where they want to live. And so today I'm introducing Geenel Wells, correct?
Correct.
All right, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, so we met at Nancy Shock's place. It's called Shocktoberfest.
Yes.
Right, here in Nashua. And you were with Coach Chloe.
Yes.
And Kylie's lacrosse coach. And we got on the topic of what you're doing. You're working for construction right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I started out in architecture, and I actually got my degree in architectural engineering, and I'm in pursuit of pursuing finishing my bachelor's degree in architecture. So that's my education, but I've worked in commercial construction for 5 years now. And
what is that like? What do you are you carrying the beams? You doing the framing?
No, not at all. I kind of warmed the office, I guess. But I had worked in, I started out in alternative energy, and I was doing more of the CAD designs and the layouts and technical proposals, and then after that I kind of launched into project management. So I was an assistant project manager in New Hampshire, as well as a few companies in Mass as well, and I had been doing junior estimating as well as an assistant project management role.
When you say alternative energy, what are you talking about?
I worked for a large commercial solar company, and there they have these large-scale solar fields, and so I was more on the engineering and AutoCAD end, and designing the layouts and really assisting the head engineers with that. Are
there different levels of CAD that people get familiar with, or is it just you just know CAD?
Well, so the education is in CAD. I learned through school, and then I just became really proficient through practicing on my own and learning through school and being certified. But that's a base layer. Where you can go with that is just endless. You know, there's the architectural route. If you're an architect, then you use CAD to lay out drawings. Now,
is there a different kind of field of architect that you want, or is it just a general architect? What do you have a specific type of field?
So there actually are, and actually there are. Each college is different. They have their own kind of culture. So there is architecture. A lot of people think of house designs. They think of, doing floor plans and, making a really nice house one day. There's the engineering route, the more technical end, architectural engineering. It's actually its own field, intermittent between architecture and engineering. So that's more laying out the mechanical units and making sure that all the internal
support beams match.
Support beams match. I mean, it comes at a disconnect from the architecture field and the engineering field. I mean, they don't always line up, and they each have their own culture.
Okay, so somebody can draw a nice picture of something, but it
doesn't mean
it's going to work.
It works, right? So
now, are you in the design part too, or do you want to be in the creative part, or in the support part, or?
So right now I'm currently in the design end. I work for a custom home builder out of Massachusetts. They do work in Greater Boston. So I started the whole design department there, and that's doing ground-up homes, that's doing smaller renovations, doing more extensive renovations. So I do all of their plans in-house. Now, I'm not an architect, but I'm under the umbrella of architectural designer, an interior designer.
Now, where did you get your degree from?
I went to local NHTI.
It's important for us.
Yeah, I went to local NHTI. I did 1 year back home in Michigan, where I was raised, but I spent my whole adult life here in New Hampshire. Learned how to drive out here, went to NHTI, and still pursuing higher education.
So you do like New Hampshire?
I do. It's safe to say that I love New Hampshire at this point.
Great. And now, if you were to pick a corporation or a type of architect company, what would be the premier of your, where are you setting your goals to? What company? Are there any companies out there that you would like to see or be part of?
Yes, there's actually one, and to my knowledge, it's the only one of its kind here in New England. It's not what people would typically think of when you go into architecture, but this company specifically, their name is called Mass Design Group, and they're a mission-aligned architectural firm. So they
What
do.
does that mean? What is a mission-aligned?
So they are a nonprofit organization, and they take architecture kind of a case-by-case basis, as you would kind of think of a social worker. So they specifically pick projects that are attached to a mission. I was watching a TED Talk from the founder. His name is Michael Murphy, and he is one of the co-founders. I think there are a few different founders of this Mass Design Group. And I'd watched his TED Talk, and he was talking about how there, for example, in the health industry, there was this doctor that had said that, where are all the architects designing things for other people? Where are they designing for people? Because when you think of architecture, you think of the craziest building that looks like a snail, or is crazy.
You can see they're trying to see how creative they can be while it's still structurally sound.
Right.
And okay, that's fine, but what does it do?
Right.
Other
So
than
the whole
build on your ego.
Right. So the whole TED Talk that I had watched was basically, he had said, why is it that the most renowned architects, their buildings serve very few? And I've always been a big community girl myself, and I was very much brought up by my community, and I was taught by my parents to serve our community. So that really stuck out to me. Where are the people that care about other people and what they do? Interesting.
It's interesting because right now the state's considering, potentially a psychiatric unit for civil people that are committed civilly, not criminally. And you wonder, are there specific needs for a psychiatric unit that's secure, but that doesn't look like it's a prison? Something like that. Would that be something in line, or? That
could definitely be something. I mean, mission aligned. We're in that case, it would be serving those people, and it would be a building or facility that would be really structured around them and what their needs are. And that's what this company does, Mass Design Group. They first assess what the need is, and then their initiatives are designing something that solves a problem, whether it's a social problem in the community, whether there are patients that need, like, for example, in a hospital that have certain requirements. Like, say it's a cancer center, and, for example, I'm just throwing this out of the blue, but if they need a lot of sunlight or interaction outdoors, then they're finding a way to get them more outdoors and make sure that they're receiving that kind of aspect for their health.
Right, natural lighting, and for
right.
it kind of builds up the spirit and helps with the healing, if you will, or
right,
something
correct.
like that.
So they don't do one thing. They first address a need in the community or a very specific building, and they come to a solution in the form of a building.
So really, it's not about the money. It's about building stuff that's going to have a purpose that you can have part of and feel fulfilled.
Absolutely.
Right.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I do need to,
money.
I need a house.
Yeah.
I need a house. I need somewhere to live and money to eat. But it is always, for me, it's always been about how can I serve other people. How can I help them or partner with them. So you're from Michigan, were your family was engaged in the community as well? They were. We were a big sports family, specifically baseball. My brothers had played wrestling, but I feel like that's one thing that really ties you to your community. Right. You get to know everyone that's also playing sports. And my school, they partnered with different initiatives like breast cancer awareness, and our coaches really pushed us. They were serving the community by coaching us, and in turn we partnered with different parts of the community doing something. I think that's indicative of coaches. It's funny, a team may come across and they may have a winning season and they get a trophy, but the input that the coach puts into the lives, you can look back over time and say, I coached that kid. That's my trophy. Right. And it's more than just a win. Right. You're engaging in people's lives. So that's interesting. And now, where are they located? They're in Massachusetts, but a specific place? Or? They're located in Boston. Oh, Boston. Yes. Okay. And wow, how large is the firm? Their team, I believe, about 25, 30 people. But they're not all architects. Some are from the healthcare industry, and they're all from a different part of the industry. Now, will you need more education to work for a company like this? For instance, a master's degree, or how far can you go with this? My pursuit is a master's. Obviously, first to finish my bachelor's degree, and then move on to obtain a master's. And I want to take it all the way to being licensed. It's always been a dream of mine, and I've thought about, what exactly it would take for me to do what I want to do, and I feel like this is what it would take. So, let's talk about your work ethic. How good are you at working? I'm good at working. I mean, it's a silly question, but people want to know. I think I'm a good worker. I have great examples in my life. My mom was an immigrant from the Philippines. My dad was in the Navy, but he's a blue-collar worker. He was an electrician, and he is now his own. He's got his master's electrician license, and he's also an electrical contractor himself. And that came about when he was probably 40s, 50s. So he owns his own business now, or? He takes different contracts himself. Okay. The business is himself, but he can do work on his own independently. Okay. It's kind of a one-man show, but he also works for other companies. But I've had that example my whole life. My dad was in the Navy, and the career came later on for him. But that was something I saw growing up. Is when we were doing homework, he was sitting there studying to get his electrical license, and that was a true testament. Like I couldn't refute that. Why do I have to do homework? So. Well, Daddy's doing it. Right. Yeah, and you got it too. So what's a typical work day for you at the construction site that you work for? So typically, just for construction, what I've been accustomed to for the past 5 years is 7 to 5:30, 6 o'clock. But lately, I've been working 8:30, 9 to 5, and late nights when it demands. But you rise early. Yeah. Rise early and you put in late nights. Sure. So. Yeah. And it's busy down there. Tracy and I went to go see a Maroon 5 concert, and she had a really good time. But on the way down there, we're just seeing buildings popping up everywhere, just construction everywhere. Oh yeah, absolutely. And Boston's been a big beacon of construction that I've studied for a long time. About 5 to 10 years ago, 5 to 8 years ago, maybe closer to that, I was reading an article about the big markets for construction. And when I was reading that, at the time was Boston. They were projecting a big surge. Portland, Oregon, and then Louisiana post-Hurricane Katrina. But Boston was one of them, and I'm fortunate. I ended up here by chance, but I'm fortunate to be here, live here, work here, and study here.
Yeah. Well, we want you to stay here. We're losing a lot of our youth, and they're leaving the state, so we want people to stay here. But I mean, if the work's there, obviously, you know, get there. And the name of the company again was?
Mass Design Group.
Mass Design Group. And would you be open to architect openings here in New Hampshire?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They're a nonprofit, and that work really interests me because it's mission aligned, it's community aligned, and so, you know, not just them. Obviously, that would be kind of like a girl crush dream of mine to be fulfilled, but any company that has that approach to things, mission aligned and serving the community, is that would be incredible to me. Interesting.
Wow. So if somebody wanted to contact you, if there's an organization out there that wanted to contact you, maybe Mass Design would want to, how would they get in touch with you?
So just my email, geenelwells@gmail.com. I might have to spell it out for them, but
yeah, we had to figure that out too. You had to correct us on your way in here.
Yeah, it's kind of a quirky spelling, but it's pronounced Geenel Wells.
So do you envision yourself eventually opening up your own firm at some time? Do you think you'd want that or do you want just working for somebody?
It could be possible, but I am a team player, and you know, you're only as good as your team's efforts. And obviously, you know, I have some skills and I have abilities, but you know, how the more great would your team be and what you can accomplish as a team.
So you like working with other people?
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
And there is some reward in that too, as well, as long as the team works well and
right.
you can get things accomplished. So what type of construction jobs are you doing right now?
So right now, specifically, it's a lot more residential. We're working in the areas of Newton, Wellesley, Weston, Brookline.
Jeez.
So doing a lot of work there, and you know, specifically there, more residential, two-family homes. Most of these are for clients. Some of these are development.
Do you get engaged with some of the, like, code and things of that nature? For you know, the building goes up, you got to have a sprinkler system, you got to have a zoning, you got to have setbacks and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah,
you
absolutely.
go through all that?
I experience that on a daily basis. You know, before you can build anything, essentially, you have to know what your setbacks are. You have to know what's allowed in the town, and this is a common occurrence. You know, to be at town hall, and we actually had gone through a special permit to lift a house in Belmont, 24 inches. So that required a lot of special permitting, a lot of meetings at town hall.
Do you go to those?
I do, yes.
Yeah. Do you apply for them for the company?
I do.
Now, how do you feel about that process? Could it be streamlined?
Sometimes it could. I definitely think it could be streamlined, but they have things in place where I can understand they're putting it out to the community, and I feel like that's what takes a little bit longer, but I do think that it could be a little streamlined, yes.
That's okay to say that. I think there's a lot of people that feel that way. But, I mean, the codes are there for a reason. It's obviously safety and other reasons, zoning, planning, whatever. But, so you're more than just a CAD person. You do a lot of other stuff that people have no clue. You know, how to get things done. That's a huge asset to your resume.
Takes a lot of time. Those things, you know, you don't really think of. You don't.
So
really
do you
think
call them up saying, look, I need an application for I got to put in a foundation. Do I get a call DigSafe or all that stuff?
Those are kind of, you know, to call DigSafe. You know, if you've been, I'm still a baby, I guess, from long industry standard, but when you are in this industry, that's protocol. You know, you get quickly accustomed to that. But there are things that, you know, for example, I wouldn't know, lifting a house 24 inches, and I think even people in the industry, they don't know what that really goes, you know, what it really entails to get that, and to get the approval and to make sure that all the documents are there.
Right. So that whole process, though, it takes time to learn that, and it takes time to learn how to sift through that and to get it done.
Yes, I mean, if you've done it before and you've done permitting through the town, you know there's some kind of requirement. You may not be sure what it is for that town because it kind of varies town to town because they have their own culture and they have their own way of doing things. But it takes a simple conversation in the beginning is, you know, I always ask, what does it take for me to get this?
Okay.
What do we have to do? What do we have to put in place?
What has been your biggest roadblock to that?
To that?
Yeah, have you ever run into a brick wall and said, oh, they're not going to give us this permit until we do something?
Yeah, sometimes I've seen opinions come into play, and which I understand. I mean, each town is its own culture, like I said before, and they want to know that what you're putting in is within that culture. And so the biggest roadblock is proving that you know what the culture is, that you're not a harm to that culture, and that you want what they want, and you want to uplift the city. You want to uplift that town.
Have you ever had an idea thinking, well, you know, if I just told them about this, it might make the project go a little bit better? Have you any experience doing that?
Yes, and we have, you know, we put all that on the table up front. You know, we don't ever try to come into meetings or come with all the documentation and just leave it strictly to that. We let them know that we're very humane, you know, we are community members and we are just like them.
Which is important for them, obviously. People don't want something just to get put up there and then, hey, it's our way or the highway, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I've been fortunate that the company that I work for now, that we work for clients that are members of that community. So it's been easier, you know, just now with where I'm working, that we can approach it that way. But if I were to work for a company that doesn't do homes, build homes, then there might be a different conversation.
So if you were to talk to millennials today, your peers, is there any advice you'd give them? I mean, right now you're still growing, you're still exploring, you're still out there doing. What advice would you give to graduating high school students?
To lean on your community. I know that's really been the topic of discussion, is community, but really you can't learn it on your own. You're not going to learn it on your own, and the sooner you get acquainted with your community and the people around you, that's an incredible tool. You know, we do get a bad stigma with being self-centered, and I see that. I mean,
the millennials, you mean?
The millennials, yes. I mean, I have bits of that too, but I think
some adults that have the same problem.
Right, but you know, we do get the stigma of being self-absorbed, and it's true. For the majority of us, we are self-absorbed, and the more time you spend in your community, honestly, I think that the better off you'll be. You'll learn the lessons that they had to learn the hard way, and you don't have to learn the hard way.
Right.
And that's what I've really learned, is that when someone says that there's an easier approach, there's probably an easier approach, that you don't have to you don't have to take the, you know, a more difficult
It seems
approach.
as though when you are engaged in your community and community outreach, there's always somebody there that's been down a different path that you can glean on, and the information's free.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And you can glean off that, and building up a good rapport with your neighbors, and people are willing to engage and help, especially Nashua. There's the spirit over Nashua for some reason. There's so many good things happening here where people are helping out other people on projects after projects. I interviewed somebody recently. He opened up a bike shop just to give to people that don't have transportation. He's not charging them anything. You know, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Right? So, you know, if people get out, you know, maybe they made mistakes and they had a DOE and they can't get around, or they just can't afford a car, or he takes in bikes, fixes them, and he gives them the bike. No charge. See ya.
That's incredible.
Yeah, but that's just one example of so many that's going on in this town. But I think, you know, people like that, that are community-minded, are the salt, that they make the difference. And it's really nice to hear a millennial, and I'm going to put you in that little umbrella, that's engaged with that. I didn't ask you to bring that up. I didn't ask you to bring That's something that came from inside you, and so that's great. I wish you the best. How do people get in touch with you?
Geenel Wells, so that's spelled Geenel Wells @gmail.com.
And you want to be an architect?
I do, yes. That is a pursuit.
Community-minded.
Community-minded.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So if you are looking for a really good architect and somebody who's community-minded, this might be your person. And if you are looking to pursue an avenue and you want to come on the show and talk about some of your gifts or your abilities, I'd be happy to interview you, and maybe we can get you acquainted with somebody that can help you out. So until next week, thanks for watching Speaking with the Senator. We'll see you later.
Every weekend, for as long as I can remember, my father would get up on a Saturday, put on a worn sweatshirt, and he'd scrape away at the squeaky old wheel of a house that we lived in. I wouldn't even call it restoration, it was a ritual, catharsis. He would spend all year scraping paint with this old heat gun and a spackle knife, and then he'd repaint where he scraped, only to begin again the following year. Scraping and rescraping, painting and repainting. The work of an old house is never meant to be done. The day my father turned 52, I got a phone call. My mother was on the line to tell me that doctors had found a lump in his stomach, terminal cancer, she told me, and he had been given only 3 weeks to live. I immediately moved home to Poughkeepsie, New York, to sit with my father on death watch, not knowing what the next days would bring us. To keep myself distracted, I rolled up my sleeves and I went about finishing what he could now no longer complete, the restoration of our old home. When that looming 3-week deadline came and then went, he was still alive. And at 3 months, he joined me. We gutted and repainted the interior. At 6 months, the old windows were refinished, and at 18 months, the rotted porch was finally replaced. And there was my father, standing with me outside, admiring a day's work, hair on his head, fully in remission, when he turned to me and he said, "You know, Michael, this house saved my life." So, the following year, I decided to go to architecture school. But there I learned something different about buildings. Recognition seemed to come to those who prioritized novel and sculptural forms like ribbons or pickles. And I think this is supposed to be a snail. Something about this bothered me. Why was it that the best architects, the greatest architecture, all beautiful and visionary and innovative, is also so rare and seems to serve so very few? And more to the point, with all of this creative talent, what more could we do? Just as I was about to start my final exams, I decided to take a break from an all-nighter and go to a lecture by Dr. Paul Farmer, a leading health activist for the global poor. And I was surprised to hear a doctor talking about architecture. Buildings are making people sicker, he said. And for the poorest in the world, this is causing epidemic-level problems. In this hospital in South Africa, patients that came in with, say, a broken leg to wait in this unventilated hallway walked out with a multi-drug resistant strand of tuberculosis. Simple designs for infection control had not been thought about, and people had died because of it. Where are the architects, Paul said. If hospitals are making people sicker, where are the architects and designers to help us build and design hospitals that allow us to heal? That following summer, I was in the back of a Land Rover with a few classmates bumping over the mountainous hillside of Rwanda. For the next year, I'd be living in Butaro, in this old guest house, which was a jail after the genocide. And I was there to design and build a new type of hospital with Dr. Farmer and his team. If hallways are making patients sicker, what if we could design a hospital that flips the hallways on the outside and makes people walk in the exterior? If mechanical systems rarely work, what if we could design a hospital that could breathe through natural ventilation and meanwhile reduce its environmental footprint? And what about the patient's experience? Evidence shows that a simple view of nature can radically improve health outcomes. So why couldn't we design a hospital where every patient had a window with a view? Simple, site-specific designs can make a hospital that heals. Designing it is one thing, getting it built, we learned, is quite another. We worked with Bruce Nizet, a brilliant engineer, and he thought about construction differently than I had been taught in school. When we had to excavate this enormous hilltop, and a bulldozer was expensive and hard to get to site, Bruce suggested doing it by hand, using a method in Rwanda called ubudehe, which means community works for the community. Hundreds of people came with shovels and hoes, and we excavated that hill in half the time and half the cost of that bulldozer. Instead of importing furniture, Bruce started a guild, and he brought in master carpenters to train others on how to make furniture by hand. And on this job site, 15 years after the Rwandan genocide, Bruce insisted that we bring on labor from all backgrounds and that half of them be women. Bruce was using the process of building to heal, not just for those who were sick, but for the entire community as a whole. We call this the locally fabricated way of building, or low-fab, and it has 4 pillars: hire locally, source regionally, train where you can, and most importantly, think about every design decision as an opportunity to invest in the dignity of the places and where you serve. Think of it like the local food movement, but for architecture. And we're convinced that this way of building can be replicated across the world and change the way that we talk about and evaluate architecture. Using the low-fab way of building, even aesthetic decisions can be designed to impact people's lives. In Butaro, we chose to use a local volcanic stone found in abundance within the area, but often considered a nuisance by farmers and piled on the side of the road. We worked with these masons to cut these stones and form them into the walls of the hospital. And when they began on this corner and wrapped around the entire hospital, they were so good at putting these stones together, they asked us if they could take down the original wall and rebuild it. And you see what is possible. It's beautiful. And the beauty, to me, comes from the fact that I know that hands cut these stones, and they formed them into this thick wall made only in this place with rocks from this soil. When you go outside today and you look at your built world, ask not only what is the environmental footprint, an important question, but what if we also asked, what is the human handprint of those who made it? We started a new practice based around these questions, and we tested it around the world. Like in Haiti, where we asked if a new hospital could help end the epidemic of cholera. In this 100-bed hospital, we designed a simple strategy to clean contaminated medical waste before it enters the water table. And our partners at Le Centre Gesquio are already saving lives because of it. Or in Malawi, we asked if a birthing center could radically reduce maternal and infant mortality. Malawi has one of the highest rates of maternal and infant death in the world. Using a simple strategy to be replicated nationally, we designed a birthing center that would attract women and their attendants to come to the hospital earlier and therefore have safer births. Or in the Congo, where we asked if an educational center could also be used to protect endangered wildlife. Poaching for ivory and bushmeat is leading to global epidemic, disease transfer, and war. In one of the hardest to reach places in the world, we used the mud and the dirt and the wood around us to construct a center that would show us ways to protect and conserve our rich biodiversity. Even here in the US, we were asked to rethink the largest university for the deaf and hard of hearing in the world. The deaf community, through sign language, shows us the power of visual communication. We designed a campus that would awaken the ways in which we as humans all communicate, both verbally and non-verbally. And even in Poughkeepsie, my hometown, we thought about old industrial infrastructure. We wondered, could we use arts and culture and design to revitalize this city and other Rust Belt cities across our nation and turn them into centers for innovation and growth? In each of these projects, we asked a simple question: what more can architecture do? And by asking that question, we were forced to consider how we could create jobs, how we could source regionally, and how we could invest in the dignity of the communities in which we serve. I have learned that architecture can be a transformative engine for change. About a year ago, I read an article about a tireless and intrepid civil rights leader named Bryan Stevenson. And Bryan had a bold architectural vision. He and his team had been documenting the over 4,000 lynchings of African Americans that had happened in the American South. And they had a plan to mark every county where these lynchings occurred and build a national memorial to the victims of lynching in Montgomery, Alabama. Countries like Germany and South Africa, and of course Rwanda, have found it necessary to build memorials to reflect on the atrocities of their past in order to heal their national psyche. We have yet to do this in the United States. So, I sent a cold email to info@equaljusticeinitiative.org. Dear Bryan, it said, I think your building project is maybe the most important project we could do in America and change the way we think about racial injustice. By any chance, do you know who will design it? Surprisingly, shockingly, Bryan got right back to me and invited me down to meet with his team and talk to them. Needless to say, I canceled all my meetings and I jumped on a plane to Montgomery, Alabama. And when I got there, Bryan and his team picked me up and we walked around the city. And they took the time to point out the many markers that have been placed all over the city to the history of the Confederacy, and the very few that mark the history of slavery. And then he walked me to a hill, and it overlooked the whole city. And he pointed out the river and the train tracks where the largest domestic slave trading port in America had once prospered. And then to the Capitol Rotunda, where George Wallace had stood on its steps and proclaimed segregation forever. And then to the very hill below us. And he said, here we will build a new memorial that will change the identity of this city and of this nation. Our two teams have worked together over the last year to design this memorial. The memorial will take us on a journey through a classical, almost familiar building type, like the Parthenon or the colonnade at the Vatican. But as we enter, the ground drops below us, and our perception shifts, where we realize that these columns evoke the lynchings which happened in the public square. And as we continue, we begin to understand the vast number of those who have yet to be put to rest, and their names will be engraved on the markers that hang above us. And just outside will be a field of identical columns. But these are temporary columns waiting in purgatory to be placed in the very counties of where these lynchings occurred. Over the next few years, this site will bear witness. As each of these markers is claimed and visibly placed in those counties, our nation will begin to heal from over a century of silence. And when we think about how it should be built, we were reminded of Ubudehe, the building process we learned about in Rwanda. We wondered if we could fill those very columns with the soil from the sites of where these killings occurred. Bryan and his team have begun collecting that soil. and preserving it in individual jars with family members, community leaders, and descendants. The act of collecting soil itself has led to a type of spiritual healing. It's an act of restorative justice. As one EJI team member noted, the collection of soil from where Will McBride was lynched. If Will McBride left one drop of sweat, one drop of blood, one hair follicle, I pray that I dug it up and that his whole body would be at peace. We plan to break ground on this memorial later this year, and it will be a place to finally speak of the unspeakable acts that have scarred this nation. When my father told me that day that this house, our house, had saved his life, what I didn't know was that he was referring to a much deeper relationship between architecture and ourselves. Buildings are not simply expressive sculptures. They make visible our personal and our collective aspirations as a society. Great architecture can give us hope. Great architecture can heal. Thank you very much.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.